Good morrow, scholars. Welcome back, to Shiver. Wow, the glare off of the screen is very interesting. Wait. Okay. Anyway, I forgot to change Iggy's light again. Dang it. Oh well. Anyway, we are in chapter 12, Grace, 49 degrees Fahrenheit, page 56. Let's see. These were not the woods that I'd walked through just a few days earlier, painted all the vivid hues of autumn. These were close woods made of 1,000 dark tree trunks turned black by dusk. The sixth sense I'd imagined guiding me before was gone. All the familiar paths destroyed by crashing hunters in orange caps. I was completely disoriented. I had to keep stopping to listen for shouts and faraway footsteps through the dry leaves. My breath was burning my throat by the time I saw the first orange cap glowing distantly out of the twilight. I shouted, but the cap didn't even turn. The figure was too far away to hear me. And then I saw the others, orange dots scattered through the woods, all moving slowly, relentlessly in the same direction, making a lot of noise, driving the wolves ahead of them. "Stop!" I shouted. I was close enough to see the outline of the nearest hunter, shotgun in his hands. I closed the distance between us, my legs protesting, stumbling a little because I was tired. I know that feeling. What's up, buddy? I think he's hungry. Anyway. It's too bad this doesn't have a pause function. Or does it? I'll check. Anyway. He stopped walking and turned, surprised, waiting until I approached. I had to get very close to see his face. It was so close tonight in the trees. His face, older and lined, seemed vaguely familiar to me, though I couldn't remember where in town I'd seen him before. The hunter frowned a strange frown at me. I thought he looked guilty, but I could have been reading into it. Well, let's see. I'm guessing that's him. Well, what are you doing here? I started to speak before realizing that I was so out of breath that I could hardly get the words out. What? Hardly get the words out. My chest is hurting again. I wonder why. Seconds ticked by as I struggled to find my voice. I actually do feel like, I don't know. I've been having trouble breathing. I think it's the weather changes and everything, and how stormy it's been. Anyway. Have to stop. I have a friend in the woods here. She was going to take photographs. He squinted at me and then looked at the darkening woods. Now? Yes, now, I said, trying not to snap. I saw a black box at his waist, a walkie-talkie. You've got to call them and tell them to stop. It's almost dark. How would they see her? The hunter stared at me for an agonizingly long moment before nodding. He reached for his walkie-talkie and unstrapped it and lifted it up and brought it toward his mouth. It felt like he was doing everything in slow motion. Hurry! Anxiety shot through me, a physical pain. The hunter clicked the button down on the walkie-talkie to speak, and suddenly a volley of shots snapped and snarled, not far away. Not little pops, like they were from the roadside, but crackling fireworks, unmistakably gunshots. My ears rang. In a weird way, I felt totally objective, like I was standing outside my own body, so I could feel that my knees were weak and trembling without knowing why. And I heard my heartbeat racing inside me, and I saw red trickling down behind my eyes, like a dream of crimson. Ugh. Like a viciously clear nightmare of death. I don't know why I said it like that. I had a weird dream last night, but I can't remember what it was. There was such a convincing metallic taste in my mouth that I touched my lips, expecting blood, but there was nothing, no pain, just the absence of feeling. There's someone in the woods, the hunter said into his walkie-talkie, as if he couldn't see that part of me was dying. My wolf. My wolf. I couldn't think of anything but his eyes. Hey, miss. This voice was younger than the hunter's, and the hand that took my shoulder was firm. Coing said, "What were you thinking taking off like that? There are people with guns here." I guess I should have said that with more urgency. Oh well. Before I could reply to that, Coing turned to the hunter. And I heard those shots. I'm fairly sure everyone in Mercy Falls heard those shots. It's one thing doing this, he jerked a hand toward the gun in the hunter's hands, and something else flaunting it. I started to twist out from under Coing's hand, his tightened fingers reflexively... he tightened his fingers reflexively and then released me when he realized what he was doing. You're from the school. What's your name? Grace Brisbane. Brisbane? I guess it depends. Iggy. Recognition dawned on the hunter's face. Lois Brisbane's daughter? Coing looked at him. The Brisbanes have a house right over there, on the edge of the woods. The hunter pointed in the direction of home. The house was invisible behind a black tangle of trees. Coing seized upon this bit of information. I'll escort you back there and then come back to find what's going on with your friend. Ralph, use that thing to tell them to stop shooting things. I don't need an escort, I said, but Coing walked with me anyway, leaving Ralph the hunter talking into his walkie-talkie. The cold air was beginning to bite and prickle on my cheeks, the evening getting cold quickly. As the sun disappeared... what? I don't know what happened there. The evening getting cold quickly as the sun disappeared. That's what it is. I felt as frozen on the inside as I was on the outside. I could still see the curtain of red falling over my eyes and hear the crackling gunfire. I was so sure that my wolf had been there. At the edge of the woods, I stopped looking at the dark glass of the back door. Ouch! Of the deck. What? The entire house looked shadowed, unoccupied, and Coing sounded dubious as he said, "Do you need me to?" "I can make it back from here, thanks." He hesitated until I stepped into our yard, and then I heard him go crashing back the way we'd come. For a long moment, I stood in the silent twilight, listening to the faraway voices in the woods and the wind rattling the dry leaves in the trees above me. And as I stood there in what I had thought was silence, I started to hear sounds that I hadn't before. The rustling of animals in the woods, turning over crisp leaves with their paws. The distant roar of trucks on the highway. The sound of fast, ragged breathing. I froze. I held my breath. But the uneven gasps weren't mine. Gosh darn it. I followed the sound, climbing cautiously onto the deck, painfully aware of the sound of each stair sighing beneath my weight. I smelled him before I saw him, my heart instantly revving up into high gear. My wolf. Then the motion detector light above the back door clicked on and flooded the porch with yellow light. And there he was, half sitting, half laying against the glass back door. My breath caught painfully in my throat as I moved still closer, hesitant. His beautiful ruff was gone, and he was naked. What? What? I'm confused. But I knew it was my wolf even before he opened his eyes, his pale yellow eyes, so familiar. Flicked open at the sound of my approach, but he didn't move. Red was smeared from his ear to his desperately human shoulders. Deadly war paint. Oh! I was confused. I can't tell you how I knew it was him, but I never doubted it. Werewolves didn't exist. Despite telling Olivia what I'd seen Jack, I hadn't really believed it. Not like this. The breeze carried the smell to my nostrils again, grounding me. Blood. I was wasting time. I pulled out my keys and reached over the top of him to open the back door. Too late, I saw one of his hands reach out, snatching air, and he crashed inside the open door, leaving a smear of red on the glass. "I'm sorry," I said. I couldn't tell if he'd heard me. Stepping over him, I hurried into the kitchen, hitting light switches as I did. I grabbed a wad of dishcloths from a drawer. As I did, I noticed my dad's car keys on the counter, hastily thrown next to a pile of papers from work. So I could use Dad's car if I had to. I ran back to the door. I was afraid the boy might have disappeared while my back was turned, a figment of my imagination, but he hadn't moved. He lay half in and half out, shaking violently. Without thinking, I grabbed him under the armpits and dragged him far enough inside that I could shut the door. I guess depending on how... Never mind. In the light of the breakfast area, blood smearing a path across the floor, he seemed tremendously real. I crouched swiftly, my voice was barely a whisper. What happened? I knew the answer, but I wanted to hear him speak. His knuckles were white, where his hand was pressed against his neck, brilliant red leaking around his fingers. Shot. My stomach squeezed with nerves, not from what he said, but the voice that said it. It was him. Human words, not a howl, but the timbre was the same. It was him. Let me see. I had to pry his hands away from his neck. There was too much blood to see the wound, so I just pressed one of the dishcloths over the mess of red that stretched from his chin to his collarbone. I could feel it. It was well beyond my first aid abilities. Hold this. His eyes flicked to me, familiar but subtly different. The wildness was tempered with a comprehension that had been absent before. I don't want to go back. The agony in his words immediately transported me to a memory. A wolf standing in silent grief before me. The boy's body jerked, a weird, unnatural movement that hurt to think about. Don't let me change. I laid a second, bigger dishcloth over his body, covering the goosebumps as best I could. In any other context, I would have been embarrassed by his nakedness. I'm kind of embarrassed. But here, his skin smeared with blood and dirt, it just made his condition more pitiful. My words were gentle, as though he might still leap up and run. What's your name? He groaned softly, one hand shaking just a bit as he held the cloth against his neck. It was already soaked through with his blood, and a thin red trail ran along his jaw and dripped to the floor. Lowering himself slowly to the floor, he laid his cheek against the wood, his breath clouding the shiny finish. Sam. He closed his eyes. Sam, I repeated. I'm Grace. I'm going to go start my dad's car. I have to take you to the hospital. He shuddered. I had to lean very close to hear his voice. Grace, I only waited a second for him to finish. When he didn't, I jumped up and grabbed the keys from the counter. I still couldn't quite believe that he wasn't my own invention, years of wishing made real. But whatever he was here now, and I wasn't about to lose him. I'm not sure why I'm pausing. Chapter 13. Sam, 45 degrees Fahrenheit. I was not a wolf, but I wasn't Sam yet either. I was a leaking womb bulging with the promise of conscious thoughts. That sounds gross. The frozen woods far behind me, the girl on the tire swing, the sound of fingers on metal strings, the future and the past, both the same, snow and then summer and then snow again. A shattered spider's web of many colors, cracked in ice, immeasurably sad. Sam, the girl said. Sam. She was past, present, future. I wanted to answer, but I was broken. That sounds depressing. Chapter 14. Grace, 45 degrees Fahrenheit. It's rude to stare, but the great thing about staring at a sedated person is that they don't know you're doing it, and the truth was I couldn't stop staring at Sam. If he'd gone to my school, he probably would have been dismissed as an emo kid, or maybe a long-lost member of the Beatles. He had that sort of mop-top black hair and interestingly shaped nose that a girl could never get away with. What? He looked nothing like a wolf, but everything like my wolf. Even now, without his familiar eyes open, a little part of me kept jumping with irrational glee, reminding myself, it's him. Oh, honey, are you still here? I thought you'd left. I turned as the green curtains parted to admit a broad-shouldered nurse. Her name tag read Sunny. I'm staying until he wakes up. I held on to the side of the hospital bed as if to prove how difficult it would be to remove me. Sunny smiled pityingly at me. He's been heavily sedated, hun. He won't wake up until the morning. I smiled back at her, my voice firm. Then that's how long I'm staying. I'd already waited hours while they removed the bullet and stitched the wound. It had to be after midnight by now. I kept waiting to feel sleepy, but I was wired. Every time I saw him, it was like another jolt. It occurred to me, belatedly, that my parents hadn't bothered to call my cell phone when they got back from Mom's gallery opening. They probably hadn't even noticed the bloody towel I'd used to hurriedly wipe up the floor, or the fact that Dad's car was missing. Or maybe they just hadn't gotten home yet. Midnight was early for them. Sunny's smile stayed in place. Okay then, she said. You know, he's awfully lucky for the bullet to just graze him. Her eyes glittered. Do you know why they did it? I frowned at her, nerves prickling. I don't follow. Why he was in the woods? Hon, you and I both know he wasn't in the woods. What? I'm confused. I raised an eyebrow, waiting for her to say something else, but she didn't. I said, yeah, he was. A hunter accidentally shot him. It wasn't a lie. Well, all but the accidentally part. I was pretty confident it was no accident. Sunny chuckled. Look, Grace, isn't it? Grace, are you his girlfriend? I grunted in a way that could be interpreted as either yes or no, depending on how the listener was listening. Sunny took it as a yes. I know you're really close to the situation, but he does need help. Realization dawned on me. I almost laughed. You think he shot himself? Look, Sunny, isn't it? Sunny, you're wrong. The nurse glared at me. Do you think we're stupid? That we wouldn't notice this? On the other side of the bed, she took Sam's limp arms and turned them into palms faced toward the ceiling in silent entreaty. What? She gestured at the scars on his wrists, memories of deep, purposeful wounds that should have been lethal. I stared at them, but they were like words in a foreign language. They meant nothing to me. I shrugged. Those are from before I knew him. I'm just telling you he didn't try and shoot himself tonight. It was some insane hunter. Sure, hun, fine. Let me know if you need anything. Sunny glared at me before backing out of the curtain and leaving me alone with Sam. This took a turn that I was not prepared for. Again. Face flushed, I shook my head and stared at my white-knuckled grip on the bed. Of all my pet peeves, condescending adults were probably at the top of the list. A second after Sunny was gone, Sam's eyes flicked open, and I jumped out of my skin, heart pounding in my ears. It took a long moment of staring at him for my pulse to return to normal. Logic told me to read his eyes as hazel, but really they were still yellow, and they were definitely fixed on me. My voice came out a lot quieter than I meant it to. You're supposed to be asleep. Who are you? His voice had the same complicated, mournful tone I remembered from his howl. He narrowed his eyes. Your voice seems so familiar. Pain flickered through me. It hadn't occurred to me that he might not remember his time as a wolf. I didn't know what the rules were for this. Sam reached his hand toward mine, and I automatically put my fingers in his. With a guilty little smile, he pulled my hand toward his nose, and he took a sniff, and then another one. This took a turn that I was not prepared for. Anyway. His smile widened, though it was still shy. It was absolutely adorable, and my breath caught somewhere in my throat. I know that smell. I didn't recognize you. You look different. I'm sorry. I feel stupid for not remembering. It takes a couple of hours for my brain to come back. He didn't release my fingers, and I didn't take them away, even though it was hard to concentrate with his skin against mine. Come back from what? Come back from when? He corrected. Come back from when I was... Sam waited. He wanted me to say it. It was harder than I thought it would be to admit it out loud, even though it shouldn't have been. When you were a wolf, I whispered. Why are you here? Because I was shot, he said pleasantly. I meant like this. I gestured toward his body, so clearly human underneath the silly hospital gown. He blinked. Oh, because it's spring. Because it's warm. Warm makes me Sam. I finally pulled my hand away and closed my eyes, trying to gather what was left of my sanity for a moment. When I opened my eyes and spoke, I said the most mundane thing possible. It's not spring, it's It's September. I'm not the best at reading people, but I thought I saw a glimmer of anxiety behind his eyes before they cleared. That's not good, he remarked. Can I ask you a favor? I had to close my eyes again at the sound of his voice, because it shouldn't have been familiar, but it was, speaking to me on some deep level, just like his eyes had always had just like his eyes always had as a wolf. There we go. Sorry. It was turning out to be more difficult to accept this than I'd thought. I opened my eyes. He was still there. I tried again, closing and then opening them once more, but he was still there. He laughed. Are you having an epileptic? Again, with the whole stumbling on the dumbest of words. Fit, maybe you should be in this bed. I glared at him, and he turned bright red as he realized another meaning for his words. I spared him from his mortification by answering his question. What's the favor? I need some clothing. I need to get out of here before they figure out I'm a freak. How do you mean? I didn't see a tail. Sam reached up and began to pry at the edge of the dressings on his neck. Are you crazy? I reached forward and grabbed at his hand. Too late. He peeled away the gauze to reveal 4 new stitches dotting a short line through old scar tissue. There was no fresh wound, still oozing blood, no evidence of the gunshot except for the pink, shiny scar. My jaw dropped. Sam smiled, clearly pleased with my reaction. See, don't you think they'd suspect something? But there was so much blood. Yeah, my skin just couldn't heal when it was bleeding so much, once they stitched me up. He shrugged and made a little gesture with his hands, like he was opening a small book. Abracadabra, there are some perks to being me. His words were light, but his expression was anxious, watching me, seeing how I was taking all this. How I was taking the fact of his existence. Okay, I just have to see something here, I told him. I stepped forward and touched the end of my fingers to the scar tissue on his neck. Somehow feeling the smooth, firm skin convinced me in a way that his words couldn't. Sam's eyes slid to my face and away again, unsure of where to look while I felt the lump of old scar beneath the prickling black sutures. I let my hand linger on his neck for slightly longer than necessary. Do you see what I mean? Not on the scar, but on the smooth, wolf-scented skin beside it. Okay, so obviously you need to leave before they look at it. But if you sign out against medical advice or just take off, we'll try to track you down. He made a face. No, they won't. They'll just figure I'm some derelict without insurance, which is true. Well, the insurance part. So much for being subtle. No, they'll think you left to avoid counseling. They think you shot yourself because of... Sam's face was puzzled. I pointed to his wrists. Oh, that. I didn't do that. I frowned at him again. I didn't want to say something like, it's okay, you have an excuse, or you can tell me, I won't judge. Because really, that'd be just as bad as Sonny, assuming that he tried to kill himself. But it wasn't as though he could have gotten those scars tripping on the stairs. Is that a reference to Bella? I feel like it is. I rubbed a thumb over, or he rubbed a thumb over one of his wrists, thoughtful. My mom did this one. My dad did the other one. I remember they counted backwards, so they do it at the same time. I still can't stand to look at the bathtub. Or a bathtub, sorry. It took me a moment to process what he meant. I don't know what did it, the flat, emotionless way he said it, the image of the scene that swam in my head, or just the shock of the evening in general, but I suddenly felt dizzy. My head whirled, my heartbeat crashed in my ears, and I hit the sticky linoleum floor hard. I don't know how many seconds I was out, but I saw the curtain slide open. At the same time, Sam thumped back down on the bed, slapping the bandage back over his neck. Then a male nurse was kneeling beside me, helping me sit up. "Are you okay?" I'd fainted. I'd never fainted in my life. I haven't, but I've come close. I closed my eyes and opened them again until the nurse had one head instead of three heads floating side by side. Then I began to lie. I just thought about all the blood when I found him. I still felt woozy, so the sounded very convincing. "Don't think about it," suggested the nurse, smiling in a very friendly way. I thought his hand was slightly too close to my... Never mind. Chest for casual contact, and that fact steeled my resolve to follow through with the humiliating plan that had just popped into my head. What? I think I need to ask an embarrassing question, I muttered, feeling my cheeks heat. This was almost as bad as if I was telling the truth. "Do you think I could borrow a pair of scrubs? My pants." "Oh," cried the poor nurse. His embarrassment at my condition was probably sharpened by his earlier flirtatious smile. "Yes, absolutely. I'll be right back." Good as his word, he returned in a few minutes, holding a folded pair of sick green scrubs in his hands. "They might be a little big, but they have strings that you can... you know." "Thanks," I mumbled. "Do you mind? I'll just change here." He's not looking at anything at the moment. I gestured toward Sam, who was looking convincingly sedated. This also took a turn I was not prepared for. The nurse vanished behind the curtains. Sam's eyes flashed open again, distinctly amused. He whispered, "Did you tell that man you went potty on yourself? You? Shut up." I hissed back furiously and chucked the scrubs at his head. "Hurry up before they find out I didn't wet myself. You seriously owe me." He grinned and slid the scrubs beneath the thin hospital sheet, wrestling them on, then tugged at the dressing from his neck and the blood pressure cuff from his arm. As the cuff dropped to the bed, he ripped off his gown and replaced it with the scrub's top. The monitor squealed in protest, flatlining and announcing his death to the staff. "Time to go," he said, and then he led the way up behind the curtains. As he paused, quickly taking in the room around us, I heard nurses rustling into his curtained area behind us. I'm confused. He was sedated, Sonny's voice rose above the others. Sam reached out and grabbed my hand, the most natural thing in the world, and pulled me into the bright light of the hall. Now that he was clothed, in scrubs no less, and not drowning in blood, nobody blinked an eye as he wended his way past the nurse's station and on toward the exit. All the while I could see his wolf's mind analyzing the situation. The tilt of his head told me what he was listening to, and the lift of his chin hinted at the sense he was gathering. Agile, despite his lanky, loose-jointed build, he cut a deft path through the clutter until we were crossing the general lobby. A syrupy country song was playing over the speaker system as my sneakers scrubbed against the ugly dark blue tartan carpet. What? Sam's bare feet made no sound. At this time of night, the lobby was empty, without even a receptionist at the desk. I felt so high on adrenaline, I thought I could probably fly up to Dad's car. The internally pragmatic corner of my mind reminded me that I needed to call the tow company to get my car off the side of the road, but I couldn't really work up proper annoyance about it because all I could think about was Sam. My wolf was a cute guy and he was holding my hand. I could die happy. I'm confused. Then I felt Sam's hesitation. He held back, his eyes fixed on the darkness that pressed against the glass door. How cold is it out there? Probably not too much colder than it was when I brought you. Why? Will it make much of a difference? Sam's face darkened. It's right on the edge. I hate this time of year. I could be either. I heard the pain in his voice. Does it hurt to change? He looked away from me. I want to be human right now. I wanted him to be human too. I'll go start the car and get the heater going. That way you'll only be in the cold for a second. He looked a little helpless, but I don't know where to go. Let's see, where was I? I completely forgot where I was when I was reading. I don't know what happened. Let's see. That way you'll only be in the cold for a second. He looked a little helpless, but I don't know where to go. Where do you normally live? I was afraid he'd say something pitiful like the homeless shelter downtown. I assumed he didn't live with the parents who had cut his wrists. Beck, one of the wolves, once he changes, a lot of us stay at his house. But if he's not changed, the heat might not be turned up, so I shook my head and let go of his hand. No, I'm getting the car and you're coming home with me. His eyes widened. Your parents. What they don't know won't kill them, I said, pushing open the door, wincing at the blast of cold night air. Sam backed away from the door, wrapping his arms around himself, but even as he shuddered with the cold, "Oh!" He bit his lip and gave me a hesitant smile. I turned toward the dark parking lot, feeling more alive and more happy and more afraid than I ever had before. Okay, that took a lot longer to read than I thought it would. Sorry about that. And I kept zoning out for some reason. I wonder why. Ow, my back kind of hurts. Well, I did take some pain medication before I started reading. That might have something to do with it. Anyway, before it gets to be too long, I need to feed you again anyhow. Thank you for listening. Let me know how I did, I suppose. Where should we go from here? I feel like playing a game before I go to work today. I wonder if I should try and play with a friend, or if I should record it. Anyway, until next time. Goodbye, everybody. I'm still sad about yesterday.